images right here of different schools that are in different stages of the habitat mapping. What we're going to sort of go across today is a lot of different things. We're going to go over the purpose and the scientific value of the habitat mapping, to learn what the habitat mapper tool does and how to use it, to learn how you might run a habitat mapper session in your setting, and then we're also going to go over some common questions. So we'll be doing a live demo of the habitat mapper tool. Some of you who are on the call might have already had experience with this tool. Some of you might have had experience with the previous version of our habitat mapping tool, which is Field Maps, and are here to learn a little bit about the new tool and how it works. And some of you might not have come across Nature Park, might not come across the habitat mapper tool before. So we've got things in here for everyone, and hopefully all of your questions will be answered by the end of it, and you'll be really excited about habitat mapping. Hopefully you already are, but even more excited than you currently are. So where does the habitat mapper tool fall in the Nature Park digital tools? So habitat mapping is the second really of our digital tools, and I'll remind you of this throughout the webinar, that before you do your habitat mapping, we really encourage you and ask you to do your site boundary before that. So the site boundary, if you've been on the Nature Park website and you've seen the map, when you scroll down, all those green dots, if you zoom into, you'll see green outlines around a school. Those are the site boundaries, and we really encourage you, the first thing you do when you sign up to Nature Park is to create your site boundary and getting yourself on the map. One of the really important reasons for this is that when you do your habitat mapping, if you've got a site boundary there, it means all that your habitats that you map will then be linked to your URN, and they'll be included in the Nature Park data. If you do habitat mapping and you don't have a site boundary there, there's no way for it to be linked to your school, so that wouldn't be included in any of the Nature Park data. So it's really, really important for you to do your site boundary. Before you do that, we have help videos on how to do your site boundary if you're having any issues with that. So please head to the Create Your Site Boundary page. There's a really helpful video on that, and it's really simple to do. So the Habitat Mapper tool falls after that. And then the next tool after that is the mapping the changes. So as we'll cover, the Habitat Mapper tool is for you to really create your first map, your baseline map, to get your starting off point. And then the mapping change tool is going to be where you're putting all the changes and improvements that you're making to your school site to monitor the change in biodiversity that's happening at your setting. So where does the Habitat Mapper fall into the 5-step cycle? Hopefully, many of you will have already seen this. This is the Nature Park 5-step cycle. So getting to know your space, identifying opportunities, making decisions, making change happen, and recording change. As you can see from those images, and as I'll stress throughout the webinar, we want students to be involved in all of these aspects. This is not something for someone to do, for a teacher to do sort of on their break or on their lunch. We want, the educators for you to be facilitating it, but the students being the ones doing all the work. So all of the habitat mapping that I'm going to be covering today, the idea is that it's you're going to be your students who are going to be the ones to do this. So the habitat mapping falls within the getting to know your space step. So step 1 of Nature Park, and it's really sort of setting up your Nature Park journey, sort of getting your, as I mentioned, getting your baseline, sort of your Nature Park lab. So then you can go on to do lots and lots of great things within your Nature Park journey, and it will really set up all your curriculum teaching for many years to come. How to find everything on the Nature Park website to do with habitat mapping. There's a lot of different ways to, but I just really want to signpost people to the resource library. This is where we have all the different resources, and I am just going to go to it on my screen now just to show people, even people who are familiar with Nature Park. I really always like to remind them about the resource library and the incredible amount of things that are on the resource library. In it, you can filter by Nature Park steps, so getting to know your space. You can filter by duration, so under 30 minutes, around an hour, or a unit of learning, which would be multiple lessons. You can filter by topics. As you can see, Nature Park is not just all about science and geography. There's lots of things for science and geography, but it's just as much about English, art and design, and we're constantly working on more and more subjects across all key stages. And then you can also filter by key stage. So we're talking about the getting to know your space. So if I filtered by getting to know your space and applied the filters, you can see unit of learning on habitats for key stage 2, how to create, creating a site boundary, mapping your site, all the other things that you can do around getting to know your site. They're all on here. All these resources you can access, without being signed up as well. So if you do work with, community groups outside of your setting, then, please use these resources as well. All this, Nature Park is completely free to access. All these are free to download, and all of these have guidance for educators as well on how to use them, and ideas on how you might adapt them as well. So just a reminder about the resource library, and that's a really easy way to find everything that you need. So what is habitat mapping with the Nature Park? Well, simply, it's a method to map and record the habitats present within your settings boundary. So you can see in this image right here, this green line around the outside is the site boundary that Rosehill have created. And then all these points, these lines, these areas within it are the habitats that they have been mapping. So whether you've got grass, trees, ponds, playgrounds, you can map all of these plus more. You can do this across your entire site as well. And we really want to stress for all the data that all your students are collecting, it's not just the tick box exercise. All that data that they're collecting is really going to really important and valuable scientific data. So it's really turning your students into scientists, into community scientists. I mentioned I'm a community science officer. There's a big community science strand within Nature Park. It's really, really exciting stuff, and it's really getting your students being community science and collecting that really important data. And as I mentioned, an essential first step in your journey that's giving you your baseline and setting you up for a lot of curriculum learning for years to come. The value of habitat mapping with Nature Park, of course, if you're going to do any activity, you want to know the value of it. So as I mentioned, it's giving you your baseline. It's really helping you and your pupils understand your site's resources before making any interventions for biodiversity. So for example, you might have an area that you think there's not really anything there, but by habitat mapping and doing the other activities, you might actually find that that's an area that's already got quite a bit of biodiversity. Maybe your area that just looks like a patch of grass actually has a lot more plant life living within it than you think. And maybe what you need to simply do for that area is to let it grow, reduce the amount of times that you're mowing. And that's a cheap way or an inexpensive way that you can improve your site for biodiversity, and maybe potentially any funds that you were thinking of devoting to that area, you can then use for another area or potentially for another project. It's an opportunity to develop green skills, so particularly GIS mapping. So these images right here, sort of a green skills framework. All these skills, very, very important, regardless of what career your students go into. The ability to interpret data, to communicate, to have creative thinking, decision making, whether you're working in forest or finance, all that stuff is incredibly important. And these are all skills that can be improved through habitat mapping. As I mentioned, the value of the data. School grounds add up to a huge area. If you've had any interaction with Nature Park, we love to throw the stat of all the primary and secondary schools add up to twice the size of Birmingham. So quite a large area. And it's a very, very under-recorded area. We really don't know what's out there. So it's really, really valuable data that you and your students are collecting about what habitats are actually on the educational estate. It allows an estimate for the amount of existing biodiversity that's on individual sites and for the nature park overall. Biodiversity can be measured through a whole range of activities. We've got our recording wildlife activity using iNaturalist. We've got our pollinator count. Those are ways of directly measuring biodiversity, but you can also indirectly measure it through the habitat mapping. So at the museum, there's a program called Predicts, which I would highly recommend looking up. And what we can do is use information through programs like that, where, say, you've got an area that's classified as a playing field or a lawn, where a lot of biodiversity data has been collected on that type of habitat in lots of other places. We can then use that to predict the level of biodiversity that there might be for a playing field or lawn within a school. So yeah, you can really get a good estimate of the existing biodiversity for these individual sites. And then obviously it allows a prediction of potential gain if changes are made. So for example, if you were starting off with a disused grey space on your site, and then you change that to add wildflowers, what would be the potential expected increase in biodiversity that you might get? And then this is something that can be tested through our pollinator count activity, through future wildlife surveys that we're going to be releasing, and then also the recording wildlife activity. You can see here, satellite data is not always accurate. You might just say, well, why we go out and do all this habitat mapping? Can you just use satellites? Well, aside from all the value that the pupils and the pupils get out of it, from active learning, from a well-being perspective of being outside and learning, satellite data is not always 100% accurate, as you can see from these images right here. So this, both of these are maps of Co-op Academy Manchester. You can see this is the habitat mapping that the students have done here, and you can see this is a land cover map from satellite data. This satellite has said that there is fresh water here, and that this brown space here is arable land, so farmland, whereas you can clearly see with the mapping that students have done, the area that the satellite has said is fresh water and is arable land is actually ground without plants, so quite likely to be their playground. So that would not give the satellite data right here a really good, accurate representation of what is actually on the educational state. So that's why it's really important, that yourself and your students are out there collecting this really valuable data, because it really helps you, but it also really gives a good information on the habitats that are on school sites. So yeah, I can't stress enough the importance of the scientific data that your students are collecting. So we're going to have an initial sort of overview of the tool, and then we're going to be going into a live demo. And then after that, we'll be talking about how you can do the habitat mapping within your site and how you can involve your students in it as much as possible. So recent changes for anyone who has been involved, been signed up to Nature Park and been involved for a decent amount of time. You might know that we were using the mobile app Field Maps to get people to add habitats onto their school site, and there was a method for you to edit and delete these on a browser, but you had to use Field Maps for adding habitats. Well, we have moved away from that. I'm sure many of you who are on this webinar are familiar with how difficult it is to get apps installed onto school tablets and Chromebooks, and the lack of access of Wi-Fi across sites. So, through feedback through our regional teams, from plenty of pupils and educators, we realized that having field maps as the only option for you to be able to add habitats was not really working and preventing a lot of people from habitat mapping. Certainly, educator training sessions I've done, people have said they saw they had to download an app and then just left it. So obviously that's not what we're hoping people will do. So you can still use field maps if you want, but you're no longer required to use field maps or use a handheld device to be able to add habitats. You can now add, edit, and delete features all in one place. There's no more habitat map editor or complete your map step. Everything is on this browser-based tool. So as long as you have a device, if you do have Wi-Fi or a data accessible device that you can use across your site. As long as you can access a web browser and log into your NaturePark account, then you can add, edit, and delete features wherever. So yeah, we really want to stress that we really appreciate feedback, whether it's about things that you like or things that aren't working so well for you. We really encourage you to feed that back to regional teams, or to get in touch with someone at NaturePark using the contact us form to let us know, because there's a good chance that if you're having an issue, then there's probably other people in the same situation who are having that same issue. And if we then see that there's a big trend of lots of people having the same issue, then we can go about making those changes, because at the end of the day, it is all about you, the educators, and your pupils. If you're not having a good time using it, then no one's probably using NaturePark, and that's obviously not what we want. We want it to be as good for the user as possible. So yeah, please, anytime, about anything, any feedback you have, we greatly appreciate it. So before using the tool, you've got to make sure that you are registered with the NaturePark website. If anyone's on this call who isn't registered, if you scan that QR code, that will take you to the registration page. And then when you are using the tool, just make sure that you're connected to the internet wherever you are submitting data from. What habitats are we mapping? So we've got 8 broad categories. We've got ground without plants, grass and wildflowers, water, flowers and food, hedges and bushes, vertical features, trees, and then micro habitats. So all of these different habitat categories have their own page on the website that you can access through the Mapping Your Site page. Each of them go through what you would need to carry out an activity around doing mapping with that. It's got educated guidance on how to run sessions involving that. They all have different activity sheets, and then they have, aside from microhabitats, they also have flow charts as well. So these are the broad categories, and then using the flow charts, you would get to more habitat types. So for example, with this school here that was doing a lot of grass and wildflower mapping, they've used the flow chart to get to playing field or lawn as that specific habitat type. So for example, activities, these are activities that we've run with primary school students, that we've run with secondary school students. All seem to really enjoy it. Hopefully those of you that are on the call that have done this can attest to that. So these are example activities around the tree category. So this activity is, getting to really look beyond, maybe if you're fortunate enough to have a patch of woodland, not that it's just a whole bunch of trees, but what's actually in that woodland, what sort of trees are living within that woodland. Is it evergreen? Is it broadleaf? Starting to introduce those concepts in there. And then this is an example of the flow chart that your students would be using with trees to then see, okay, is it a line of trees, is it an orchard, is it a broadleaf woodland, an evergreen woodland, or mixed woodland? So it's very, we really encourage you to use these activities, use those flow charts to really get to your answer, because we can get a lot of information, as I said, about biodiversity from knowing whether it's a broadleaf woodland or an evergreen woodland, or if it's a mixed woodland, or even if it's an orchard. So how to access to the tool? Again, I'll go through this when we do the live demo. So you log into your NaturePark account and make your way to the Mapping Your Site page. You're going to click the Launch Activity button, which you can see right here. If you do get this image that pops up immediately, make sure that you click on this blue button here and don't click down here and try to log in with your NaturePark account. Just make sure you click on this blue button here, and that will take you through the sign-in page and right onto the Habitat Mapper tool. This is an image of the Habitat Mapper tool. You'll see it again just in a moment. Those of you that have used the Habitat Map Editor before will see it's relatively similar to that. So if you're editing features or you're adding features, you're always going to make sure that this Edit tab is highlighted, and then you're simply drawing on what you found, or you're editing something that you might have put on outside using a tablet or a Chromebook on the browser tool, and then maybe you want to refine it inside, you can do that as well. I'm also going to be showing the snapping and the tooltips features on this. So the tooltips feature is a way that if you're putting on lines or areas, so if you're putting on a line, say a line of fence that you have along here, if you already know how long that line of fencing is, it will tell you the length, so you can get information on the size of a fence. But then also, if you're doing an area, it will also give you the square meter of that area as well. And then snapping feature, again, I'll show this when we do the live demo, but it means that you can sort of snap the border of different habitats together. So for example, if you're mapping grass and wildflowers here, and then ground without plants here, it will mean that these two, if you're drawing the line here, they'll snap together. So it just allows for a cleaner map and means that you don't have little gaps here and there between the different habitats that you are putting on. Again, I'll show this, but how to add, edit, or delete features. So you've got to make sure that the edit tab is highlighted. So that's this one right here. To add, you're going to scroll down on here, select your feature from the list, draw it on the map. You're going to select the habitat category and create. So if you select grass and wildflowers, it will already have that, but then you'd be selecting whether it's playing field or lawn or meadow. Same for ground without plants. It will already have that up there for you. But then you can say, oh, is it non-natural impermeable surface or non-natural permeable surface? If you're editing and deleting, you also want to make sure that the edit tab is highlighted, and you are then going to select, click on this button right here to edit features, and then you click on your feature and you can delete it or you can refine the shape. But again, we're going to go over this in just a moment when we do the live demo, which is right now. So how to access the habitat mapper. So when you, sorry, I'll log back in. So if you go to the Nature Park homepage, click log in. This will take you to your dashboard. So you can see right here, there's an immediate link to the habitat mapper. Also, if you scroll down, you can see the different things, different activities you've got in progress, ones that have completed, and you can see the mapping of site here. As I said, you can do find it via the resource library, or you can simply search here, mapping your site. Click on it, and that takes you to the page. So just to sort of show off the page a little bit, we've got a whole section on preparing for mapping your site and planning your sessions. We've got a link to all the different habitats as well. So for example, if I clicked on ground without plants, got a whole section on ground without plants, the importance of it. You can access the habitat mapper tool straight from here. Gives you a little information about what you need and how to prepare. And then, as I said, guidance, the worksheet, the flow chart, a little step-by-step about how you might want to do it, and maybe some reflections you might want to think about with your students as well, and then things to try next. So I'm going to launch, so you want to find on this page, launch activity, or go down to open habitat mapper tool. So I'll click on this. Just give it a moment. Okay, so this has brought up the habitat mapper tool. So this little splash screen right here is encouraging you and sort of reminding you that you can add, edit, and delete features on here. In terms of the, there's no right or wrong way to do Nature Park, but certainly one way that we'd encourage you to do the mapping is to focus on areas first, so those larger areas first, then moving on to lines, and then moving on to points. And there's just a reminder here that it's in the getting to know your space step. You can obviously click on don't show this again. But if you click enter and you immediately forgotten everything that says, you can just click the information button here and it will pop up. And as a reminder, if you did get that blue button that says click here to access the National Education Nature Park community, just click on that blue button and that will take you right to here as well. You can change your base map on this to a whole bunch of different maps. But one thing, even if you change the base map, when you get to try and sort of allow for as accurate a habitat map as possible, once you go past a certain, and this is where we're going to be doing the demo today in Edinburgh, once you go past a certain area, it will automatically change. You can see there the change from here to there is automatically going to change to this really high resolution layer right there. So if you're looking out past here, you can change the base map, but past here, it's going to immediately be changing to this photographic layer right here. To get into adding things and adding on the snapping feature and tooltips, you just click on here. Obviously, one thing I should have mentioned, if you want to find your location, you can obviously put in the search bar right here, or you can click on this if you've got location services enabled on your device. That'll take you right to where you are. So we want to have the edit tab highlighted. You can see if I was going to do editing or deleting, I would click on this, and then this is the list of all the different features. Of course, you can search for them right here, but all the different points, lines, and areas that you might be adding. And as just a reminder, we encourage you to start with areas first, then lines, and then your micro habitat points. So to turn on the tooltips feature and the snapping feature, you click on the settings button here. You can do enable tooltips and then enable snapping here. And then just make sure you click on this down arrow here to click that you want to enable snapping for the habitat mapper survey. You can click on that and only select it for some of the different types, but we just recommend that you do it for all three of them. So we're going to go over how to add something. So let's say, for example, we want to map this area right here. Students have gone out and they've come back in the classroom and they're going to be adding the feature. As I said, we want the students involved as much of this as possible. We were with Year 5 students yesterday at a school in Newham, and we were outside. They had their Chromebooks, and they were the ones adding it onto the nature park map. But we've also done it with students where we've come back in at the end of a session and then brought the mapper up on an interactive screen and had the students then come up and add it back when we're in the classroom. So I'll talk a bit more about that later. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but we really want the students to be the ones to be adding it on the map. They certainly definitely feel a sense of pride, because once something's been added and created, it then goes on the live map, and certainly giving them that sense of once they've added something, anyone across the world who just goes on the Nature Park website and goes down to the map on the homepage can then see the habitats that they've added. So yeah, it definitely, at least with the students that I've done it with, really brings a sense of pride, and they're like, wait a minute, anyone can see what I've just done. Seems to really excite them for sure. So we can start off by, say, going through mapping this area. So I'll go down to grasses and wildflowers, and you can see that my cursor turns into crosshairs. This is the tooltips feature right here, where it's got the longitude and the latitude and the area. So simply to add an area, you click once, click again, and then you go down. That right angle right there is from the snapping feature. You can then go down. You can see it's already starting to calculate the area right there, and the area is already forming. Click there, click there, click there. And then to finish a shape, simply double click, and that is the shape right there. Then this will come up on the side. You can see this is the URN for the Nature Park test site. So your URN, if you've got a site boundary already, your URN would pop up here. We've got the habitat group, grass and wildflowers. It's already there because I selected the option. And then we can go to the habitats and see what we've got. And these are related to what's on the flow chart. So maybe we found that this is actually all meadow. We can click on meadow, simply scroll down, click create. and that's now live on the nature park map. Now, let's say we want to map this area right here. We can go to ground without plants. We can click here, and you can see that because I've got the snapping feature enabled, it's automatically snapping it to these lines right here. So I can drag this down. Double click that and say ground without plants. We've gone through our flow chart, seen that it's non-natural and permeable surface, and click create. If you want to add a line, I'm just going to turn off tooltips just for the moment, just so it's a little bit more visible for you. So then let's say we've actually got a line of trees that are going through our meadow. You can put lines and microhabitats on top of areas. So again, simply you click on it, it turns into crosshairs, and you can do, let's say you've got a zigzag line of trees. You can do it like this. Say it goes like there. Double click. And again, because you've already selected trees, it's got that as a habitat group. And then habitat, again, we always encourage you to use the one that's under the recommended tab. Trees in a line, create. And there it is. And then let's say you've got a bat box along these trees. You could click on bat box, and then you can put it right there. And because it's a microhabitat, it's just a point. It's already assigned as bat box, and you can click create. One thing I should mention, and this is something that we have seen one or two people do, so just something to flag, that if you're mapping an area like this, that you want to use habitat area and you don't want to put a line around it. If you put a line around it, the only area that would be counted is the area covered by the line, not the area in the middle. So if you are doing an area, please don't just put a line around it that says trees or says grasses and wildflowers. Make sure that you are using a habitat area for that. So now let's say that we've gone out, we've been doing this out in the field, and then we've come back into the classroom and we've realized our map doesn't look exactly how we want to, that we want to make some edits to it, or that the back, this line of trees didn't exactly, go how we wanted it, and maybe we want to do that, have a go at doing that again. To edit or delete, you just click select. Then you select on the feature that you want to change. So here we've got the grasses and wildflowers. We can, if you select on it once, you can move it wherever. But if you select on it a second time, that will bring up these orange and white dots. You can click on the white dots to bring up more dots. And for these, it just means that you can refine the shape slightly. You realize that your shape is actually slightly different to how you drew it when you look at it a second time, or even after you've created it. If you want to make a slight edit, you can very simply do that. But just make sure that once you've done that, you click update, and that's immediately updated. If you're clicking on an area where you've got multiple things, so we've got the bat box on a line of trees over grass and wildflowers, you just select on the thing that you want to edit. So let's say we put it as a bat box, but it's actually something else. We can just click on that. And if we wanted to delete it, we can just click delete. And then just a warning, it is permanently removed. There's no undoing in this. So if you click keep feature, it'll obviously stay there. But if you click delete, then it is gone. One thing also to note, as you can see, when we've clicked on these things, that it's got your school's URN from your site boundary. If you've encountered a situation where your school's URN has changed, then what we ask you to do is, if you've done some habitat mapping already, you do have to click on the features. It will then pop up with your new URN here, and you just click update to update that URN. There's no way, unfortunately, to do that automatically. So just as a reminder, if your URN has changed and you've done some mapping, just to click on those features, your new URN will pop up here, but you have to click update for it to be linked to your new URN. So that is how you use the Habitat Mapper tool. Much simpler than field maps. I'll mention this later, but say if I was out using this on a tablet or a phone, I don't have to drag with my finger to make this area. What I would simply do is, if I had selected grass and wildflowers, I would tap here, tap here, tap here, tap here, tap here, tap here, and the shape will form for me. And then I would, where I want to finish the shape, so say I want to finish shape up here, I would just double tap, and then that same section will pop up on the right, where you can then call it plain field or a lawn or meadow or tall wild patches. And then you simply click create, and that's created right there for you. Okay, so one just last thing to mention, you might have been wondering that when I zoomed out this far, why all the microhabitat points were in gray, but the lines and areas are not in gray, because these are relating to points and very small areas. We don't really want you to be mapping these from such a far out distance. So you can see, as soon as you get much closer in, where you'd more accurately be able to judge and put where those were from the mapping that you've done outside, then those become available for you to put on. Okay, so that is how you use the Habitat Mapper tool. So now we are going to go back to the presentation. So we're going to talk a bit about habitat mapping in your setting. We've sort of seen how to use the tool, but how might you actually go about habitat mapping in your setting? Well, as I said before, there's no right or wrong way to do nature park. It's really what works for you, what works for your setting. You know, we're really encouraging schools to use a whole school approach with this. So if it takes a little bit of extra time to get that whole school approach, we really encourage you sort of to take that time, because we want this to help as many students as possible, and as many students to be involved with all the activities as possible. You might do it at different times of the year depending on the season. So your playground's really going to be your playground the same, whether it's spring, summer, autumn, or winter. But that's not really going to be the case for your grass. So, for example, with the school that we were in yesterday, they've got a small patch of grass around their parking lot that we'd sort of looked a little bit in the winter, but there was a bit of frost over it. There wasn't really much that we could see there. But when we were in there yesterday, there was actually a lot of different things growing within that, and we were really able to the students were really able to identify a wide range of plants that were in there. So not scientifically identify them, but see that this leaf looks like this, and that's different to this leaf, and that's different to this leaf, which got them to the answer that they were looking at a meadow. Whereas if they were looking at that within the winter, that might not really be as visible and as easy to see. So you can do it at different times of the year. And what we really are encouraging you to do, as I mentioned, this is sort of your baseline. So mapping an area before making those changes to really understand what was there. If we're not trying to discourage you from making changes to your school site, please continue doing them. But if you're making changes as part of your nature park journey, and whilst you've been signed up to nature park, we would encourage you to make those, to document those changes in the mapping change tool, and to map what was there beforehand, because that means that you can really get a representation of the work that you've been doing and the improvements to your school site and to biodiversity and to your students' well-being that you have made. So how to plan your mapping. As I showed on the mapping your site page, we've got a whole section on planning. But one of the things in it I really like to highlight is this planner tool. So there's a couple pages on how to use it and ways to think about planning. But this is just a simple table that's got all the different habitat categories that you can go through with your students to think about, if you've got that habitat category, how many areas in your school have that habitat category, which age group, or class you want to potentially use that with. And then this is, as I said, the order that we sort of recommend that you carry out the different mapping activities. So it's a really, you might have a conversation and come up with a great plan, but it's a really great way to get that plan down. And that's an easy way for you to, involve any ground staff, other teachers, SLT, as much as possible in, the planning of the mapping and the executing of the mapping. Because as I said, we really want it to be a whole school approach, and as many, students and staff and people in the school community to benefit from being involved in Nature Park as much as possible. Because obviously, as I mentioned, it's really important, the well-being for the students, but also well-being, for staff as well, and people that are working within the school. Well-being doesn't just affect young people, it affects people of all ages. We've got lots of scaffolding activities. You might have looked at what I just showed you with the habitat mapping. You might be from a nursery, early years, and think, well, my students, I don't think that they can do this. Well, we've got lots of different activities across all key stages, through nursery, through secondary school, around habitat mapping. So some of you might be familiar with the Hidden Nature Challenge. So that is an activity encouraging your students to go out and taking a photo of sort of one of 5 different things. So it's a place without nature, a repeated pattern in nature, something that might be new to them, or a plant in an unexpected place. So just sort of getting them to look a bit beyond what they might see normally when they're going out about in their school day. Habitat Heroes, I should say, for Hidden Nature Challenge, we have different options as well. So we have an option where you can write about your sort of thoughts and feelings about what the photos you've taken, but then also options where that, you don't have to include any writing as well. So we want to try and made a lot of effort to make sure things are accessible for everyone as possible, because obviously that's a big important part of Nature Park. We want it to be for everyone. Habitat Heroes, we've got that for Key Stage 2+, but then also early years and Key Stage 1. So this is an example of Habitat Heroes. So something simple. So looking around outside the school site, finding a place that's good for bumblebees and butterflies, birds, worms, spiders, slugs and snails, hedgehogs and frogs. And then this is an example of the Key Stage 2+ page. What makes this place good for this living thing? So having them write on it and just starting to think about maybe some of the needs of these different species. We've also got an activity called What Habitats Do We Have? So that's an activity that can run really well alongside the using the planner tool. But as I said, we've got plenty more in the resource library that you can filter by key stage, by step, by the amount of time as well, and then also the subject that you want to link to. So if thinking about, say, English, for example, we've got something around writing a poem or writing a vision statement about sort of, maybe what you've already got in your school site. So it's, as I said, not just for science and geography. We want this to be for teachers of all subjects and pupils who are interested in all subjects as well. So how might you run a habitat mapping session? Of course, this depends on what you have on your school site, how large it is, and what habitats you have. One thing I'll mention is we've got lots of case studies on the website, and a link to a blog post on. We've recently done a case study in 3 different schools and 3 different ways that different schools have done habitat mapping, and we've got a blog post that links to all of those. You can find them individually on the case studies page. We've got a blog post that has a short intro and that links to all of those, so that's going to be linked to in the chat as well. But so just talking from my experience of going into schools and the way that we've done it, but again, as I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You could divide your class into different habitats and send one class to maybe look at the send a few groups. We've generally put them in groups of three when we've done it, dividing them into maybe having a couple groups looking at ground without plants. You could maybe have, especially for maybe some of your more energetic students, this is certainly something that I've used when we've been around some more energetic students, using the microhabitats activity and getting them to go around the school site, burning off a little energy, looking for all those different microhabitats. So things like bird boxes, bat boxes, wildlife stacks, log piles, whole range of different things that can work really well. You could obviously print off, if you're doing it offline, printing off a map of your site. So just taking a screenshot from the Habitat Mapper tool that will show your site boundary, give the students a piece of paper and getting them to write notes directly on the map. So using the flowchart to then draw on that paper map what they found. Make sure they label it, because there's certainly been one or two times that, obviously we encourage the students to label it, where we've had students who have drawn great things on their paper map, but they've gone around doing microhabitats and put lots of crosses, but not labeled what they have found. So just a reminder to encourage them to do that. Obviously, as I mentioned, if you've got tablets, you've got Signal, and you've got a handheld device, then you can use the Habitat Mapper tool outside. But yeah, if you're doing it offline and you don't have access to tablets or Signal throughout your school site, then it's really nice to then bring those paper maps back into the classroom, and then you can discuss the habitats that the different groups have found, and you could get each group to come up to the interactive screen to add their own area or their line or their points on. And this can really encourage a lot of conversation. So for example, let's say you've got a large area of grass. You could have, say, one group looking at the playground, one group looking at the grass, but then swap them over to have that first group then looking at grass and that second group then looking at ground without plants, and see if they're coming to the same answers about the habitat that they found, because then that can lead to a lot of sort of extra discussion. And certainly when we've had the students come up and discussing and putting the habitats on the map, discussing the habitats they found, and then what it might mean. So generally when we've been discussing ground without plants, in the activity sheet, there's bits about whether it's permeable or impermeable, and often with the students that leads to, and this is all driven by them, leads to a discussion about flooding, because obviously when the playground is flooded, that's not great for staff or students. So then they sort of encourages discussion about, well, how might we want to mitigate that flooding and potentially what could we do? So like I said, using it as a springboard to continue on your nature park journey. One thing I'll highly recommend, and this is from having gone into a lot of schools and running sessions with a lot of different students. If you've got the same habitats in different areas, so you've got multiple playgrounds or multiple patches of grass or multiple patches of trees, I'm sure this is something that a lot of you already do, but I'd highly recommend when you're printing off the activity guides and the flow charts, laminating them and then getting the students to use sort of a dry erase marker. It certainly saves on printing, and it's very easy to wipe it off if they're then using it with a new group. So that's one thing I would highly recommend. And then also remind about the activities in the flow charts. So these activity guides and the flow chart for ground without plants. So again, getting them to look at it sort of step by step, and then making sure that they use the flow chart for sure. If you see that that they've come up with an answer that you yourself would think that's probably not the right thing, we certainly encourage to then say to us, well, how did you get to that answer? How did you get to non-natural permeable surface? And you might find some groups that they can easily show you how they did it, but certainly I had one group yesterday where they said it was rock, and I said, well, how did you get to that on the flow chart? And they said, oh, we didn't use the flow chart. So just a reminder to encourage them to use the flowchart and the activity guides. It's all there, all free, all easy to access. And yeah, it works really, really well. But yeah, just as sometimes you do get a group that says something and you're like, I'm pretty sure it's not that. So just as a reminder to encourage them to use the flow chart when they're discussing, especially when they're discussing things and putting things on at the end. So some frequently asked questions that come up about the Habitat Mapper, which I've already covered, but just to make a highlight of them. Offline use, so it does require an internet connection to use the browser-based tool and to upload things. So you can't use it offline. So that's where we certainly recommend using a paper map and then coming back in the classroom and adding it on. It can be used on any device that can access a web browser, so your phone, tablet, Chromebook. And yeah, on a tablet and phones, handheld device, you don't need to drag your finger across to draw features. On the field maps, that was something that generally would happen, and it did lead to a lot of interesting shapes, certainly when we were doing it with students. So just a reminder, you just need to tap, and if you're doing an area, that area will then form. And as I said, right there, simply tap your finger on the screen as if you were clicking a mouse. What happens to the data? So the data that's captured by the tool is all stored in ArcGIS Online. So that's Esri, who are a partner in the Nature Park Partnership. As soon as you click create, that data is automatically presented on the Nature Park map on the Habitat Mapper tool, but more importantly, on the homepage of the Nature Park website. So it means anyone across the world who goes on the Nature Park website can see that. You can then, explore the habitats, within your school site, but also look at, local settings as well to see, what other schools have signed up and what habitat mapping they have done. So, for example, if you've got a school nearby that's got a meadow, which you didn't know about, but you've got a relationship with that school, then you could maybe start a dialogue with that school about that meadow, how they went about creating it, how they look after it, and really get more of a link with them. And then there's a lot of research that's going on with Nature Park. As I've already stressed, this data is really important data that's being collected, and there's a lot of Nature Park research that's going on. So that data will be certainly incorporated into that. What to do next? Of course, the fun does not stop after you finish your map. There's lots and lots of things that you can do afterwards. As I said, this is setting up your Nature Park journey. You can obviously always keep getting to know your space through things like the pollinator count, using iNaturalist to record the wildlife on your site and all the other activities. You can start thinking with your students of ways to improve your school. This is a screenshot right here on the right of our ideas for improvement cards. We find this activity works really, really well. We've gone into, for example, we went into a sixth form college and we were giving a sort of a presentation on Nature Park, and they were silent. It was like they weren't even in the room. We brought out the ideas for improvement cards, and it was like they were completely different people. They were really, really engaged there, and it was just sort of a springboard to help them come up with their own ideas and think about different things. And then also using the mapping change tool. So we've got videos and we've got guidance on there, and that's where you're putting in the changes that you've made, and that's what we're comparing against that baseline, that first map. We've got lots of habitat guidance on the Nature Park website that hopefully you've come across. So the theme of the first year was sort of changing grey to green, and we've got guidance on how to do all these 6 different things right here, and they're all guidance that's been tailored for schools. We've also got one on adding flower-rich grassland. So again, 3 different ways to do it, from just stopping mowing to depaving. We've also got a page on ponds as well. And most importantly, as I'm sure is a important topic for all of you on the call, we have links on how to find funding as well. So we've got links to different national ways of finding funding, but then also how to access things for free as well, because there are a lot of people out there. The school we were at yesterday in Newham, they recently got 9 trees for free that the organization came in and put them in. So there are places out there that offer free trees as well, and other things. So yeah, ways to find funding and link up with different organizations. So I want to say, yeah, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Hopefully you found it very useful. And as I said, please send any feedback. If you go on the contact us page on the Nature Park website, there's a way to contact our national inbox, but also most importantly, there's also a way, we've got regional teams who led by RHS and LTL, Lengthy Landscapes, across the country, and they all have their own inboxes. They all do a lot of great work, and there's links on finding local help and expertise page. Got a link to all of their email addresses right there. So yeah, certainly if you're in doubt about anything, or you're having issues with anything, whether it's habitat mapping or any other aspect of Nature Park, please reach out to them. They're very knowledgeable, and they're always happy to help as well. So it could be something simple or something complicated. Please, please send it through for any help you might need. So yeah, thank you very much. And I think now we'll get on to the Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, I know, sorry, we've only got just a couple moments, couple minutes left.
That's
Laura,
okay. Hi there, Tom. Thank you for that. Thanks. That was great. Yes, we've got a couple of questions. So one was from Joe, just clarifying what are the tools and settings that we need to activate. But she's actually answered her own question. It's the snapping tool and tool tips. That's correct, isn't it?
Yep. And yeah, so certainly out of the two, I would recommend, you don't always need to have the tool tips up there. You can have it up there if you'd like, but certainly the snapping feature is the main one that I'd highly encourage you to use.
Great, thanks, Tom. And then we've got one more from David, who works for a multi-academy trust, and he's the trust forest school lead. And he's asking if it's more valuable to log the data of the school estate, or would our forest, which is in a semi-ancient woodland that they've got a long lease on, also be appropriate? I'm guessing that's whether it's part of the school site or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would depend if so if it's part of the school site, certainly log it. But if it's not part of the school site, then yeah, we wouldn't ask. Nature Park is all about the educational state. So if it falls within the educational state and falls on a school site that's got a URN, please add it. But no, that wouldn't be. We wouldn't be asking you to map that. If you could certainly use the resources and to map it with a group, but we would ask you not to add it onto the digital map.
Great, thanks, Tom. That's all of the questions that we've had through, right on time, at 5:15. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions, please do send them through the contact form or hello@educationnaturepark.org.uk. But yeah, I think that's all we've got time for today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.